The relentless march for water, the opening shot is of feet. Not knuckles, but two flat, callous soles lifting and falling in rhythmic desperation. They moved with an awkward, rolling gait, a promise of speed, not yet its fulfillment. Asha, young, lean, and with eyes that seemed to drink the horizon, led the line. The sun, a brutal, blinding eye, was directly overhead, burning the color from the savannah. The air shimmered, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. The Omo were moving, not for territory, but for water. The dry season had stretched its jaws wide, and the river they trusted, the ribbon of life, was now a chain of stagnant, shrinking pools. The journey had thinned the tribe. The old male, Kar, stumbled on the uneven ground, his breath a raspy echo in his throat. Clasped to Asha's flank was Elu, her infant, silent save for the tiny, desperate suckling motions against the empty breast. This was a forced march, a gamble on a rumored spring miles away, known only from the elders' fading memory of a great storm years past. They moved as one organism, unified by the single, relentless imperative: find water or perish. Asha paused, not with her body, but with her awareness. She tipped her head back, her face a mask of primal assessment. High above, a line of marabou storks traced an invisible path. They were heading not to a carcass, but to a vast, deep water source, the sign. She touched the hand of Mara, her sister, a gesture of silent command. The line shifted, angling away from the relative safety of the thorn thicket, committing fully to the perilous open ground. They walked bipedally. This was their advantage, their defiant adaptation. It raised them above the grass, giving them sight across the rolling plain, and, critically, it kept their vital organs out of the hottest, closest layer of heat rising off the baked earth. Every step was a declaration: we walk. Their eyes, elevated above the shimmering heat, scanned the distance for the telltale green line of a distant riverbed or the darker shadow of high-crowned acacia. The rolling gait of the early walkers was clumsy, inefficient for a quick sprint, but miraculously enduring for the long haul. Kar's struggle and Asha's innovation. But the savannah demanded a toll. The heat pressed in, leaching moisture from muscle and bone. Kar, the elder, could not keep up the pace. His feet dragged. He was the keeper of knowledge, the edible roots, the safe sleep sites, the ancestral migration paths. To leave him was to abandon their history. To wait for him was to risk the future of the children. His face was etched with a profound, terrifying weariness, a weariness that bordered on acceptance of the end. Asha looked at the small, sturdy stick she carried, a tool used for digging and defense. She was not the strongest, but she was the most resilient. She halted the tribe near a solitary, stunted acacia, its shade barely larger than their huddle. Using a small, sharp piece of quartz she'd been carrying, a natural tool of opportunity, she rapidly stripped the tough outer bark from a length of the stick. With swift, expert movements, Mara helped her bind two strong vines to the stick, pulling them tight with her teeth. They worked with the furious speed of creatures racing their own exhaustion. This created a crude, but effective carrying yoke. It was a massive expenditure of energy in their dehydrated state, but a vital investment in the knowledge held by Kar. They secured the ends of the yoke to Kar's thin waist and to a younger, stronger male, Tusk, whose arms were long, his posture powerful, but whose eyes still held the fear of the open land. The yoke of unity, the tribe was moving again, now slower, but unified. Kar shuffled forward, pulled by the energy of the youth, his survival now tethered to the tribe's collective will. This was the first payment the savannah exacted: unity or death. The sun began its slow, majestic descent, trading its brutal intensity for a prolonged golden glare. The shadows of the Omo stretched out long and thin across the plain, spectral twins walking alongside them. They were running out of light, but the storks had been a truth-teller. Muddy respite and foraging hope. Hours later, the Omo found a break in the landscape, a shallow, cracked depression lined with dark, mineral-rich earth. A seepage, not a spring, but enough. They knew the signs: the slight moisture clinging to the stones, the different pattern of the low-growing mosses. They dropped to their knees, digging furiously with their hands and the sharpened stick tools, scraping away the dusty crust until a muddy slurry appeared. They didn't drink. They waited, allowing the sediment and the disturbed insects to settle. A vital lesson learned from generations of watching the wary, thirsty herbivores. Patience saves lives. As they waited, the older children, led by a sharp-eyed male named Rel, began to forage. They knew the safe plants, the tough, fiber-rich sedges, and the tubers that hid deep beneath the sun-baked soil, the only sources of stored water in this barren landscape. Rel struck a thick, tough root with a fist-sized, rounded stone, a hammerstone picked up days before near a dry riverbed. The root cracked, revealing a starch-rich core. Every calorie was a triumph. Survival was a continuous, frantic negotiation with the environment, a constant accounting of energy gained versus energy spent. But this moment of relief was a scent on the wind to those who hunted. A shift in the air, not audible but perceptible, the silent shadow of danger. The deep, heavy thudding of hooves, not in panic, but in measured, powerful pursuit. A massive shape broke from the tall grass 50 paces away, a herd of Deinotherium, a giant, shovel-tusked elephant ancestor. In a panicked, blinding charge, their massive bodies shaking the earth. The Omo had been too focused on the ground, too sure in their open-ground vigilance. Their water-seeking minds had blinded them to the perimeter. But the Deinotherium was not chasing them. It was fleeing. The Dinofelis ambushed predator's gaze behind the herd, moving with terrifying, silent efficiency, was the true terror. Dinofelis, a large, powerfully built, saber-toothed cat, its coat the color of dried grass, blending perfectly with the setting sun's glare. Its musculature was built for ambush and devastating short bursts of speed. The cat was stalking the herd stragglers, but it saw the Omo small, soft, and easy first. The hunter's instinct shifted instantly to the nearest, weakest prey. The charge was instantaneous. The Omo scattered like wind-blown leaves. Diversion and desperation primal choice. Asha, holding Elu, was closest to the thicket. Instinct screamed tree. Climb high. But Kar, bound by the yoke and crippled by exhaustion, was stranded in the open. Tusk, the younger male, hesitated. A fatal fraction of a second, his mind torn between self-preservation and communal duty. Asha did not. She dropped to a near crouch, but only to sling Elu securely onto her back, tying him with a spare vine. She snatched a thick, heavy branch lying nearby, a tool now weapon. She ran not away from the cat, but directly towards the immediate danger, the exposed Kar and Tusk. The Dinofelis was magnificent and terrible, its upper canines, the sabers, glinting like obsidian daggers in the fading light. It lunged at Tusk, who dodged with a frantic, desperate agility, rolling and scrambling away from the crushing, tooth-filled jaws. Asha's survival strategy was not strength, but distraction and speed. As the cat's focus locked onto the fleeing Tusk, Asha slammed the heavy branch into the ground near the cat's hind leg, creating a blinding cloud of dust and a sudden, sharp crack. It was a calculated risk. The cat reacted, not out of pain, but out of surprise and irritation at the unexpected noise and sudden movement behind it. This was the briefest of chances. Tusk, galvanized by Asha's insane courage, grabbed Kar's rope yoke and yanked the elder violently toward the nearest scrub thicket, forcing him to move faster than his aging body should allow. Asha did not follow them. She ran in the opposite direction, toward a low, rocky outcrop, consciously luring the cat away from the slower members. She was the decoy, the sacrifice. She knew the cat's focus was on the easiest prey, and she needed only to be the most difficult prey. Her bipedal running was faster than the cat's short burst, but it could not be sustained. She was gambling her life on the cat's predatory inertia. She reached the low-lying outcrop. There, lying near a discarded, smoothed river stone, was a split, razor-sharp piece of chert, left by a passing baboon or cracked by the sudden, intense heat of the sun. Pure, improbable luck. She snatched it up, the sharp edge drawing a tiny bead of blood on her palm. The The Dinofelis paused, its great body tense, assessing the strange, small creature standing alone, now armed with a sharp fragment. It coiled, a low, ominous growl rumbling in its chest. Defiance on the rock. Asha did the unthinkable. She did not throw the stone. She did not flee. With a shriek that ripped from her diaphragm, a sound of absolute, non-negotiable fury, she plunged the sharp chert point deep into the dusty ground at her feet. Not as a weapon, but as a symbolic act of defiance. I will not be moved. The cat hesitated. It was built for instinct, for the weak, the sick, and the fleeing. It had never seen a creature so small and yet so defiant. Its primal programming was built on easy kills. This one was neither easy nor weak. The noise, the strange, upright posture, and the flash of the sharp rock were a challenge it had not expected. It snarled again, a low, guttural vibration. But then, perhaps hearing the retreating thunder of the Deinotherium herd, its primal calculus settled on the larger, more substantial meal. It slipped into the grass, vanishing as if the earth had swallowed it, taking its terrible hunger with it. The Omo watched from the thicket, silent, breathing the dust and the adrenaline. Asha stood on the rock, her chest heaving, the chert still clutched in her hand, a single drop of her own blood staining the pale stone. The crisis was averted, but the lesson was brutal. The ground was not free. The spring was secured. A muddy trough, yes, but life-giving, its water filtered by the earth. The Omo drank deeply, sucking the water slowly, carefully, not gulping, allowing their desiccated bodies to recover. Kar, his fear now replaced by an exhausted gratitude, pointed with a trembling hand to a patch of low-growing herbs, a medicinal knowledge passed down for millennia. They chewed the bitter leaves, the compounds settling their stomachs and calming the residual panic that still vibrated in their muscles. This was the rhythm of survival. Crisis, followed by an immediate, necessary return to the mundane. The fear must be banked, the energy replenished. As the sun lowered fully, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple, a promise of a cooler, safer night, the Omo turned to the river for food. They had no true hunting tools, but the water's edge was a larder. They waded in shallow pools, driving small fish and snapping frogs toward the banks, trapping them with cupped hands and crude, quickly woven baskets of reeds. Cooperative fishing and foraging was the only secure meal in this uncertain land. The marrow revelation, Asha, still holding the chert from her confrontation, noticed a peculiar thing. Tusk, sitting nearby, was struggling to crack open a large bone he'd found, the relic of a previous predator's kill. He was smashing it repeatedly with a river stone, the bone merely chipping, the precious marrow unreachable. It was a waste of energy and a source of frustration. Asha moved to him, her actions driven by the recent danger and the sharp need for calories. She placed the chert on a flat rock, an anvil stone. She took a second, smaller, and more precise hammerstone. She struck the edge of the chert, not with brute force, but with a deliberate, glancing blow. It was an action of insight, understanding the fracture patterns of the stone, not just the power of the strike. Crack! The sound was sharp, alien to the natural world. A perfect, sharp flake of rock detached from the core. A simple stone tool, a nascent technology, the first glimmer of the Paleolithic, was born from necessity and a stroke of luck. It wasn't the product of forethought, but a direct, desperate response to a lethal threat and a dire need for fatty marrow. The perfect flake, with its razor-sharp edge, could slice flesh, strip bark, or, as Tusk immediately recognized, cut a deep score into the thick bone. A few more blows with the hammerstone, guided by the score, and the bone split cleanly, revealing the rich, white marrow within. A low, communal hum of satisfaction rose from the tribe. The taste of the marrow, rich, fatty, and utterly vital for their energy-starved brains, was the reward. They had not just survived. They had adapted and innovated. But this moment of peace was a mirage. Standoff at the river Gora, threat, conflict, and twist too. The rival encounter as the last sliver of sun vanished, and the world descended into the deep, moonless blackness of the night, A low, guttural call echoed from the opposite bank of the river, where the thick gallery forest had not yet retreated. It was not the call of a predator. It was a cry of challenge, of territoriality. Other hominins. The Omo froze. It was the Gora, a larger, heavier-set lineage that had not embraced the open ground. They were fiercely territorial, still relying on the safety of the dense canopy and the brutal strength of their numbers. They were not friends. They were competition for the scarce resources of the river. On the riverbank, silhouetted against the dim moonlight, stood 3 towering males of the Gora. They were armed, not with carefully flaked stone, but with heavy, splintered branches torn directly from the trees, crude clubs that emphasized raw, crushing power. Their shadows loomed large, a terrifying testament to their superior bulk. The Gora had seen the Omo's small fire, a low, smoky glow created from dry dung and kindling, used for comfort and to deter biting insects, and, more importantly, smelled the rich, cooking fat of the marrow. They wanted the food, and they wanted to assert dominance over the crucial water source. The primal bargain, primal choice. To fight a group of larger, stronger rivals for a few scraps was suicide. The Omo would be decimated. But to abandon the water source and the safety of the night camp was a slower death. They were trapped between the river and the darkness. Kar, the elder, stepped forward, his eyes burning with an ancient light, his face showing no fear, only deep resolve. He gestured not to the Gora, but to the water. He pantomimed the digging, the patient waiting, the shared bounty of the river. He was proposing a primal bargain. There is enough. Take only what you need. Do not risk the night for what can be shared. The largest Gora male, his face a mask of suspicion and contempt for the smaller, leaner Omo, simply raised his club higher, a clear, silent threat. The Omo's response was silent and unified. They did not raise their clubs, for they had none that could match the Gora's heft. Instead, they raised the simple, sharp stones and the pointed digging sticks. Every member stood together, side by side, their bipedal stance giving them a small, crucial advantage in height and visibility, making them appear larger and more formidable than their actual size. They did not move, a wall of small, desperate courage. The standoff stretched, a tense, silent negotiation of wills. The moon climbed higher, casting a sterile white light on the river. The Gora, accustomed to quick intimidation and the easy flight of their rivals, found themselves facing an unexpected unity and determination. They were stronger, but the Omo was cohesive. The energy required for a full-scale battle, even if won, would draw every predator within miles and waste precious blood and time. The Gora hesitated. The cost was too high. The Gora male dropped his club, not in surrender, but in a sign of grudging, temporary respect for their unity. He strode across the river's mudbank, snatched a half-eaten fish from the Omo's catch, and retreated back into the blackness of the forest, his 2 companions trailing behind. The tax was paid. The Omo had kept their water, their camp, and their lives through collective defense and silent, unified resolve. They had learned that, on the open savanna, the strength of the group was the only true weapon. The remaining days were a relentless, monotonous cycle of survival. Foraging, digging for water, and watching the horizon. Asha and Tusk, now bound by the shared life and death experience, became the tribe's new center of power. Asha, the visionary and adapter, her mind focused on efficiency and innovation. Tusk, the cautious protector and strength, his body now conditioned to the open ground. They continued their move, slowly, ever further into the open savanna, leaving the contested river behind, the promise of the massive spring drawing them on. Flight from the flames. The environment itself became a character, a relentless enemy. A sudden, terrifying grass fire, started by a dry season lightning strike, forced a desperate, nighttime retreat. The wall of flame, roaring and devouring the dry grass, was an unreasoning killer. They fled, not running, but walking with a swift, enduring pace, the fire's roar chasing them like a living thing. It was in that panicked, endless walk that the full power of endurance bipedalism was realized. While the four-legged creatures of the forest tired quickly from the heat, the need to stop and rest, and the sheer effort of the pace, the Omo, with their cooling, elevated bodies and long, striding gait, covered miles without faltering. They walked the fire away. They had found their true adaptation. Ascent to the last refuge. The journey led them to the base of a great, rocky escarpment, a monumental wall of stone that split the savanna, rising like the spine of the earth. The escarpment was an oasis of opportunity and the final, ultimate threat. On its sheer face grew the rare, spiny fruits of the high country, and near its summit lay a series of dry caves, the perfect shelter from the coming, unpredictable seasonal storm that Asha could sense gathering on the horizon. The air was thick, heavy, and metallic. Climactic struggle. The ascent and the defining trial to survive the coming deluge. They had to climb. The final ascent was a brutal test of their physical adaptation. The climb was too steep for a fully bipedal ascent. They were forced to revert, climbing on all fours, using their powerful grasping hands and feet to navigate the treacherous rock faces, a painful reminder of their arboreal past. Elu, the infant, was strapped tightly to Asha's back with a vine, the risk immense, but leaving him behind impossible. Every fingerhold was a prayer. They reached a narrow ledge, a pathway to the highest, most sheltered cave. But as they pulled themselves onto the ledge, exhausted, trembling, a high, piercing cry echoed from above. They had company. Not the Gora, but their cousins, equally adapted to the rocky terrain. A troop of massive, territorial savanna baboons. They were powerful, smarter than the average ape, and saw the Omo not as kin, but as competition for the cave. Baboon confrontation, the leaping threat. The baboons attacked immediately, shrieking, baring their massive canines, their faces contorted with rage, and hurling loose stones from the heights with frightening accuracy. This was the climax. Not a duel with a single predator, but a desperate, elevated battle for the last safe haven on the savanna. The Omo were trapped between the storm at their back and the snarling terror at their front. The Omo could not win a contest of brute strength. The baboons were larger, faster climbers, and had the advantage of the higher ground. Asha, still clutching the chert flake, the simple stone tool, now wrapped in a scrap of dried hide, knew their only chance was to turn the baboon's natural weapon against them. As a large male baboon lunged at Tusk, Asha raised the hand with the flake and, with a precision born of desperation, slashed the air just above the baboon's leaping head. The sharp edge caught the thick skin of its shoulder, drawing a line of bright, shocking red. The baboon shrieked, but not just from pain, from profound primal shock. It had never seen a weapon that could cut in such a clean, non-blunt way. The cut was not deep, but the sight of its own blood and the strange, sharp, glittering instrument gave it a terrifying pause. Its momentum faltered. Tactical defense, Tusk's throw. Tusk, seeing Asha's action, seeing the power in the blood and the sharp stone, understood the new calculus of violence. He found a heavier, rounded rock, a proper throwing stone, and seeing the baboon hesitate, he did not fight. He threw the rock, a massive, powerful heave, straight toward the main group behind the wounded baboon. The combination of the strange, cutting weapon and the heavy, unexpected missile, a tactical team-up, shattered the baboon's formation. Confused, bleeding, and facing creatures that fought with calculated, unnatural precision, the baboons retreated higher up the cliff face, their screams of rage replaced by yelps of confusion and alarm. The Omo had done it. They had used technology and cooperation to defeat a physically superior foe. Refuge from the storm. They stumbled into the cave just as the storm broke. The rain fell in sheets, a torrent that washed the dust and the blood from the savanna floor. The sky was ripped open by thunder and lightning. Inside the deep, dry shelter, the Omo collapsed, the adrenaline draining away, leaving them utterly spent, smelling of wet earth, fear, and exertion. Resolution and emotional payoff. Asha crawled to Elu, the infant. The child was silent, exhausted, but safe. She nursed him, the milk finally flowing freely, thick and life-sustaining. The tribe watched, a silent, communal exhale of relief. The continuity of their line, the purpose of their endless struggle, was embodied in the small, sucking child. The passing of authority Kar, the elder, his face lined with the memory of the past, looked at Asha. He took her hand, the one that held the chert flake, and raised it toward the low, smoky firelight. He then looked at Tusk, his chest heaving, his body marked with minor scrapes and bruises from the flight. Kar put his hand on Tusk's shoulder, a gesture of profound approval and trust. It was a silent, ceremonial passing of authority. The wisdom of the ancestor, Kar, united with the strength of the protector, Tusk, and the ingenuity of the innovator, Asha. The tribe was not just a collection of individuals. It was an interlinked, resilient unit forged by fire and stone. They had proven they could survive as a collective, not merely as individuals. They shared the final scraps of marrow and spiny fruit. In the deep quiet of the cave, with the storm washing the world clean outside, they were alive. Dawn over the new world as the storm passed, and the sun rose, the first clear, golden dawn after the deluge. Asha stood at the mouth of the cave. The valley floor below was transformed. The torrent had collected in the basin, leaving behind a vast, shimmering lake. The rumored spring was no longer a hope. It was a reality, a gigantic mirror reflecting the newly cleaned sky. She stood fully upright, her silhouette framed by the morning light. She no longer had to look at the ground in fear, nor anxiously seek the safety of the trees. She looked across the vast, now watered savanna, her gaze steady, her posture defiant, her hands empty of fear and instead, holding the promise of a future. The enduring journey, ancestral footprints, she was not merely surviving. She was claiming the world. The Omo had walked out of the forest and, through grit, cooperation, and the simple power of a sharp stone, had taken the first, irreversible step toward a new destiny. The age of the great upright walker had truly begun. The challenge was not over, but their nature had changed forever.